I have no idea where that music came from. Hi, everybody. It's our CFB Talk 118. As I turn this on, they added a music button for hosts, so we are learning as we go along. I'm going to go ahead and add my co-host JD. Again, my name is Bobak Kyrie. I'm going to be joined by my regular co-host JD Moore. We'd love to hear from you. It's Tuesday. There's so much going on. 24 FBS programs have had coaching changes. 10 bowl games have been played. One bowl game is being played right now. Who's winning in all of this? America. America's winning. That's who. So again, hit request. We'd love to talk to you. JD, have you made it up here?
Yeah, we have made it up here. It is, in fact, a wonderful day for America with college football happening on our screens right now. And of course, we now have a full slate on the coaching carousel. Don't believe at this point there are any more open positions for head coaching. We are now just waiting out for the announcing of coordinators, of special teams coaches, of assistants. It kind of seems like the carousel has finally stopped. I know we normally typically get like a January surprise or something else like that along the way. But, for now, it seems like the carousel is now stopped spinning. And Bobak, it's been a wild ride, as it always is every single season. What has stood out to you so far in this cycle with all these 24 positions now taken?
I think the most surprising one to me is still Trent Dilfer. I mean, not counting obviously the tragedy with Mike Leach. That's its own category in and of itself. But in terms of hiring, UAB, losing Bill Clark for health reasons before the season began, and going through all of that and coming out with Trent Dilfer, it's certainly the most interesting one in the sense that I think UAB might not have had the conversation it would have had. It wouldn't have been in as many conversations had they not made such a out of left field hire. But second to that, I'm maybe going with Deion Sanders, but to me, Dilfer is the more interesting one only because it was so radically unexpected. Deion, somebody was going to get him eventually. I think there's some surprise that he chose Colorado, and there's some logical explanations for that as well. But I think that one surprised me the most. How about you, JD?
I think you are definitely right with Trent Dilfer to UAB. I think you're definitely right with Deion Sanders to Colorado. I'm going to go still, though. I think the one that surprised me the absolute most was Luke Fickell to Wisconsin. I thought it was kind of clear at this point that, Luke Fickell was just going to hold out for the Ohio State job at this point. But for him to come out of nowhere for the Wisconsin job, especially with, it had been so galvanized that they were doing the Barry Alvarez model for the last 30 plus years. And that was the model that had succeeded at Wisconsin. And for them to go, you know what? Luke Fickell, and he's going to run the show however he wants. Jim Leonard, no longer a part of that program. I thought that was by far and away, at least in terms of shock value, because, you can change a couple of the names. Like, yes, you mentioned that Deion Sanders was going to go somewhere. I think it's a surprise that Colorado ended up being the one getting him. But him going up to a Power 5 program, don't think that's necessarily a shock. Trent Dilfer going to UAB, yes, that name individually is a shock. But, UAB trustees trying to kill the Blazers program once again with going with something just completely out of left field, not necessarily out of character. For Wisconsin to go so far out of character and end up landing such a huge hire for them, I think that still is probably the hire of this cycle and definitely the most shocking one, at least for me.
I do wonder, was that something where do you think they made a reach and somehow were surprised they got some interest back, and then it kind of, the momentum immediately carried. They're like, oh my gosh, he said he might be considering it. And, next thing you know, they make that hire. I wonder, we'll probably hear more eventually as time goes on. I was just looking at the current, because right now, I mean, the Boca Raton Bowl is going on. Uh, Toledo has it's in the fourth quarter. It's only 13-7 Toledo over Liberty. I mean, obviously Liberty, I don't think Hugh Freeze is coaching this game. It's just interesting to me to watch how that season's ended for them. They started 8-1 with only loss being at a ranked Wake Forest. And then, they were on a 3-game losing streak when Auburn found their man. And it looks like they might be on their way to another loss. Certainly this offense looks super anemic, which isn't necessarily something we've seen from Liberty, even in many of their losses this season. But
Yeah,
we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with Liberty, I mean, we talk about surprising coaching hires. I don't think anybody had Jamie Chadwell to Liberty on their bingo board, at least at the start of the year. I think a lot of people thought he might go to a Georgia Tech type job or somewhere else on the East Coast. But for Liberty to swipe in, and I think it was for $4 million a year, I don't think the number from Liberty was necessarily that surprising. They were paying Hugh Freeze something like $5 million a year. But for Jamie Chadwell, to do his step up, to go from Coastal Carolina, which a lot of people expected him to go, to some new program. The fact that Liberty ended up being the winner of that sweepstakes, I think that was another very big surprise. And I'm very curious to see what happens with him, because we also got to talk about the other elephant in the room. There has been so much activity in the transfer portal in these last couple of weeks, and especially with guys like Grayson McCall. Now out and on the portal looking for a new team. A couple of reports that Florida might be the head program for him to go to. We've seen a couple of moves like Devin Leary going from North Carolina State to Kentucky. We saw news earlier today of one of the Brockenmeyer twins going from Alabama back home to the DFW area, taking a role at TCU, which also has been absolutely killing it in this transfer portal cycle. There's been a lot of really massive moves so far in the transfer portal, and especially when you consider how much turmoil you've had with coaches changing off on different teams. I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with all these other guys who are going to try to fit in and fill all these other roles that we're going to see right now across the country.
Absolutely. You see, and by the way, before I keep talking, because you guys are hearing a lot of me, I want to welcome any of you who want to join the conversation. Just hit request. We'd love to have you on and hear your thoughts on what's going on in college football, because obviously there's always a lot. We're in the middle of bowl season. But going back to what we were just talking about, it's fun to see the indirect comments by coaches. I think today, was it Mac Brown? You see this cycle of coaches complaining about people making plays on their star players and trying to lure them away. Yeah, pardon me. It was Pitt head coach Pat Narduzzi said to a radio station that he heard two schools offered UNC quarterback Drake May $5 million to transfer. He won't say who, but he knows who. And I remember earlier we heard trainer at UTSA make the same comment that people are making plays on their players. Part of me is like, it's something they all like to do. It's a bit opposing. It feels like to say, we're don't poach my players, but at the same time, if they had the ability to poach, they probably would. And if anything, it's like the head coaching market; they could leave at any second themselves. So it to me, the portal has made it a little more even for some of these players, especially seeing their head coach who they might have committed to the program, not because less for the name of the program, but for the head coach, allow them to kind of follow and move with them. Of course, clearly Caleb Williams proved that can be extremely beneficial to your career and to your national hype level, which is already high at Oklahoma and just went through the roof at USC. So we'll see if we'll see more of that. We have someone who's joined us. We'd love to hear from you. The civilized choice. What's going on?
Not much. Good evening. First of all, first time in the space, so thank you for having me. Just to piggyback on your last statement, I saw a tweet from the head coach from the University of Texas, San Antonio, saying that Power 5 conferences have been poaching from his younger players in his program. So it's kind of leaking down to the champions of the smaller conferences as well, trying to lure those players that might pull somebody up from mediocrity to challenge it. So I feel that point right there. Now, the other thing that I have an interesting Mike Leach story. I know everybody's been, sharing their memories. I never met the man in person, but I did get the chance to work at Iowa Wesleyan 10 years, about 8 to 10 years after him and Hal Mumme came through. So basically, I got all the backstories and the reasons why things weren't going well there. And they said basically the Pirate was the Pirate, just very eccentric, very charismatic, and very creative on offense. I remember they had the record books out, and every team from their era there had some kind of offensive record. So He did it for a long time on different levels. And, I just, after following behind him, I just followed his career and hoped I just got one chance to meet him, and never did.
It's amazing though. Like, I love hearing that, you got to follow his legacy at Iowa Wesleyan. It is clear that Mike Leach touched a lot of different people, even if he didn't individually meet them. Of course, his memorial service was today at Mississippi State, but I would love to hear more about what you did at Iowa Wesleyan and some of those stories that you had heard about him.
Well, I was a receivers coach then. So that was actually my first job, my first coaching job, um, about 2003. So I think he had moved on to Texas Tech at that time. So a lot of the stories were about how him and Mummy refused to live on the NAIA budget, to say the least. So the main one, we wondered why we had to travel buses everywhere and, take these 10, 12 hours. And they would pull out receipts from when they were flying into cities and then busing back into these backwater towns and stuff. And it was like they broke the program. And that was the funniest part about it. But they were in playoffs. They loved the fact that they were in the playoffs, that they had all these great athletes, that they were doing all this great stuff. But the money, it was all about the money, even on the NAIA level. So,
I love that. That is like an FBS budget for an NAIA team, which is no, they're not gonna be able to maintain that.
I played D2. I played at Lane College, and we bussed everywhere. Bussing was when the coaches started complaining about why are we bussing. I looked at them like, "What do you mean? Why are we bussing?" I was totally comfortable with it. So and then to hear the stories about why we can't do it, it was like, "Oh wow." So it was funny because my comfort level was on a different level than everybody else I was coaching with. They had all came from I had one of Mummy's disciples, one of his centers was my offensive coordinator. I had my head coach was from Central Arkansas, but that was before they actually went in the NCAA and D1. And then let's see. I had my quarterback's coach was from Eastern Illinois. So they were all used to a little bit better accommodations. I wasn't worried about it.
I love all of that. Man, like, especially like, you're coming out of a school like Lane, out of from the SEAC, and then you're now in Iowa Wesleyan as an assistant, especially in a wide receiver role, where you're following up on the legacies of Hal Mumme and Mike Leach and all that kind of stuff. What was your
running the air raid pure?
Oh, yes.
Not anything watered down. It was handed down from Mummy and Leach themselves. Like you could still see their handwriting in the book. It was like it was like one of them coaching God moments. Like, oh, I still have it somewhere. I just don't know where I put it. That's the problem.
I can imagine there was such a huge legacy for you, and especially for that being your first coaching gig, for you to have to live up to that type of legacy. What were some of the things that you learned on the job because of that impact?
Well, it was how to change on the fly. Because we had actually brought in this kid from Washington State, was supposed to be a big time upgrade at QB, but he didn't know how to get rid of the ball, so he took a few shots too many, and he was out for most of the year. So basically, we went from having a 6'5", 210-pound quarterback that could actually run the offense if he gets rid of the ball to a 5'10", 195-pound, basically running back with an arm.
That is a dynamic changing difference. I imagine that scheme also had to change a whole lot. I mean, you're probably going from wide open air raid to a different kind of scheme concept. What kind of game
Screen,
planning did you have to do around that?
screen, until week 8, it was screens, a lot of mesh, a lot of screens, mesh. We try to get them roll out and probably run a lot of sale concept, Y sale, things like that. But eventually they just went back to what he ran in high school. He had never been a passing quarterback. So they went back to the smokestack I formation. And guess who was left with no receivers?
I can take three guesses, and I'm sure the first two ain't going to count.
Oh, yep, you'll be there. So for the last 2 weeks of the season, I actually was kind of like I went back to like the scout team coordinator, just making sure they got good looks. But we weren't passing for nothing. Wasn't trying to pass, and it was that was kind of like a big dynamic change because you come out there in the summer and you're just throwing the ball everywhere, and you're looking at all these different concepts and you're trying to install, and then week 10 you're in the snow at the University of San Xavier in Chicago getting your brains beat in because you can't throw the ball.
Man, that is great. I love all of this. You know, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think you're right about that UTSA thing. I know JD and I were kind of talking about that earlier, and just watching these reactions. And Jeff Trainer, that head coach, he's a great guy. We had him, as a guest on one of our talks earlier in the season. But he's got to say that though, because again, you always wonder if suddenly one of their, if a G5 suddenly gets some just wildly rich alumnus suddenly fund an NIL fund that can make them compete with everybody and anybody, you know, then I don't know if they'd be quite complaining quite as much. But yeah, it's a tricky business. Although you feel a little bit good for some of the players, although it's got to be tough for some others. Like you watch, you got a great offense, you're excited about your team, and then your star player gets plucked away. That's got to be your teammate. That's got to be a bit difficult.
Very heart wrenching. And I mean, I've been out of college for about 5 years now. So I've been on the high school level for the past two. And I can tell some of my players come back and they're like, I just don't feel like I'm getting my best shot. Son, you've only been there for 5 minutes.
Absolutely on
Absolutely.
that. And I do also want to throw one last thing out there before we move on from Jeff Traylor. Certainly appreciate the fact that, he's coming out and he's making accusations. We've seen kind of the same from some of these Power Five coaches like Pat Narduzzi. But I'm going to throw a challenge out to any coach who wants to claim tampering. Come out with receipts. Name a program, give us something juicy about who actually is trying to tamper with your guys, who's trying to pay $5 million for your quarterback. Give us some names. Give us the content.
Exactly. We want drama. Let's make it interesting for all of us. But spill the tea, damn it. Anyway, it was great hearing from you, man. Thank you so much for joining us. All right,
Thank you very
Caden,
much
what's
for
up? You've
having me.
been patient.
Hey, what's up, guys? Shout out JD, fellow Bob Schieffer, School of Communication alumni myself. Let's go. Really excited for the playoff, obviously, but with news of Max Duggan entering the NFL draft, I guess more so a question for JD. What are your thoughts on the quarterback situation going into the next football season? I really like Sam Jackson a lot. I really hope he doesn't transfer. Really wanted to get your take on if you think we're going to get Hudson Card or someone else out of the portal, or what direction you think we ought to go with the quarterback position heading into next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Love this question because I love the intrigue that you've got around this position. I think, first and foremost, more than anything else, I think this is Chandler Morris's job to lose. And the fact that Max Duggan is no longer going to be on the roster for next year, he's going on in his NFL draft. Shout out to him. Obviously, I don't think he's necessarily going to be like a first round draft pick or anything else like that. But, my man has studied Andy Dalton up and down and seen you can make $10 million a year holding a clipboard. We call that financial finesse. You learned that at the Neely School of Business, and you absolutely can make a nice little career out of that. Now, that being said, you got to remember, at the start of this year, Chandler Morris was the starter. We didn't have Max Duggan as the starter, as the Heisman runner-up, as this guy who's going to take TCU to the playoff. So I think immediately Chandler Morris is probably that favorite in the clubhouse for TCU. Love the athleticism of Sam Jackson. Love the ability that he has to take the ball and run and bring that different dimension of the offense out there. But knowing the offense that Sonny Dykes thrives in is that air raid derivative where you have a guy who can pass and then run second. I think Sam Jackson kind of goes more into that run first, kind of more like a Trayvon Boykin. If you're going to go a little bit back to another TCU quarterback. So I think if we're going to look for who's probably going to be the starter, at least on paper, starting out in spring football, I imagine Chandler Morris has to be the guy. And then, Hudson Card certainly could be a transfer to TCU. I've heard some rumors that he wants to stay in the state of Texas. I don't have enough evidence or at least high enough sourcing to say it one way or the other. But, we saw Shane Buechele really kind of reinvent himself at SMU under Sonny Dykes. I'm sure there's going to be some transfer quarterback who could come in and make a huge impact at TCU. But if I had to pick right now, I think it's probably going to be Chandler Morris.
Feels like a really good spot to come as a transfer, just with all the talent that we have outside. I mean, healthy Quincy Brown next year, Jordan Hudson, getting some of these transfer guys in, Besh from LSU, just to name a couple. But it's been a crazy, crazy couple of days with recruiting, seeing TCU signing all these top tier recruits and transfer pickups. So love what you guys do. Been a fan of your work for a long time, ever since you've been at TCU 360. So thanks so much, JD. Have a good one, brother. Go Frogs.
Hey, thank you so much, man. Appreciate you, Caden.
Absolutely. Hey, Christian, you've been really patient. What's going on?
What's up, Reddit College Football and JD? I know this topic is kind of old, but it's still one that really interests me. Is probably conference realignment. I think we can all agree that the Sun Belt has become that perennial non-Power Five conference, but I think the American Conference kind of lost their chance there. I feel like if I was the American Conference, I would have went after some bigger name group of five schools, probably like a Boise State, tried to make an actual, like, maybe it wouldn't have been geographically big, but I think we've realized that geographics don't really matter anymore, especially with two California schools in the Big Ten. But I mean in the in the Big Ten. But I was thinking, like, why wouldn't the American Conference go after some schools like Boise State, some of those Western schools, some of the good CUSA schools, probably try to poach a couple of Sunbelt schools. I was wondering why they didn't try to keep their name as the non-Power 5 conference.
So I think in terms of at least conference realignment, I think a lot of the American Conference wanted to stay in that southeastern-ish profile, which is why you kind of see them going after teams like Rice and Charlotte and UTSA and FAU and all these other different programs that are in the South and East, not necessarily, I think, for, football quality or, national name recognition, but the ability to really kind of be honed in on, number one, major metroplexes. That was a huge reason that they ended up going with those kinds of schools because, you got Rice located directly in Houston, which is a top 5 population in the country. You've got UTSA in San Antonio, which is a top 10. You've got Charlotte. You've got FAU, which is in South Florida. You've got all these different programs that are very metroplex heavy, and you don't necessarily see that out in the West for the teams that are available. I mean, your best option, if we go, like a Boise State, like Boise is definitely a growing city, but compared to where you're going to be able to have that kind of infrastructure, that kind of build out, that the American wanted, it's not going to be on the same level as a New Orleans with Tulane or a Memphis with Memphis or any of these other programs that they've really targeted in this last wave of realignment. Now why they decided to target those cities, that's going to be the decision of those actual conference leaders more so than myself. But I know that was a very specific strategy with this administration of who they wanted to target after they lost their Cincinnati's, after they lost their Houston's, and these other major programs from major cities. That was a huge reason that they ended up going for those teams that they did.
One thing that always struck me was how patient the Sun Belt has been over the years, only because, back in 2015, when I started covering some of the Sun Belt Conference media days, their commissioner was always very adamant when he'd be asked about the relationship with ESPN, in the sense that that was their TV partner. They weren't being paid a ton, so it wasn't, a huge amount of money, but they had a very strong relationship with ESPN. And he was like, this is it. We put all our eggs in this basket. We feel like it's going to pay off in the long run, and we're going to sit with it. And it made them seem a little bit, I wasn't sure if it was naive. It just seemed risky because it was all your eggs in one basket. We even see, obviously, when you get into the huge conferences, of course, they can say, like, well, our primary rights are with ESPN and maybe some with Fox, some with CBS, whatever, But it seems to have finally just really paid off for them. They made a couple of really wise moves. They were going to expand, and they did some, I thought, risky moves, because when I started covering them, they had 2 football-only members. They had New Mexico State and they had Idaho, and they booted them out while they were able to bring in, Coastal Carolina, and they thought that was going to be enough to kind of create a full program of 10 conference, because they went from 11 to 10. But they at the time, that allowed them to have, in their opinion, kind of a full conference with all full members. And again, it seemed a little risky, but I absolutely am impressed by how that paid off in the long run, because you're right. Of the G5s, they definitely seem to have won that last round of conference realignment by pulling in, obviously you bring a strong name like James Madison from FCS. They've been overtures to them for many years. Conference USA seemed to really want them to join, and then finally they decided to move up. They were very deliberate about it. They built up their program, they built up their stadium, they built up their facilities. That's why they were able to land and have such a solid 8-3 season with a full FBS schedule. They only had like one FCS team, but they were also able to lure, longtime G5 programs with a lot of success behind them, like Marshall, and, pull in Old Dominion, pull in, programs that I think were surprising, like even Southern Miss, another strong program. I mean, a program with just strong history. I mean, if you've ever been to Hattiesburg, that campus, it struck me. First of all, that stadium's way bigger than I think a lot of people realize, but it impressed me a lot. And American, I think, as JD, I think, put it best. I mean, first of all, there's only so much you can do in getting other programs. If anything, it seems like this, hungry hippos by there's a trickle down kind of thing with the 2 largest FBS program, probably FBS conferences, eating up so many, becoming mega conferences of so many teams that the other 3 are forced to take on new members. So it really is just a vacuum that is hard to fight against. So they have to get kind of creative among the G5s and how they're going to expand and just keep a competitive number of teams, and not sort of end up like some of the programs, some of the conferences you see in the smaller divisions, where they'll have to like double up conference opponents and play twice a year in order to get a full schedule. But I think that's a really interesting observation in all of that. I'm really curious to see how this plays out in the long run, and perhaps, I don't know who would be next to be pulled up. I mean, we're waiting. I think maybe the expanded playoffs slowed everything down at the beginning of the season. I think we're all waiting for that next shoe to drop to sort of see who's going to be the next one to pull, especially with that, it seemed like an impending knife fight between the Pac-12 and Big 12, which could still happen. But it seemed like we were just waiting to see who was going to grab a team from who. But that expanded playoff essentially guaranteeing a lot of the spots to the conference champions may have put some ice on some of that, and perhaps we'll see some calm there, because if that ended up happening, we were going to have to see who was going to backfill some of the other P5s. But I don't know. This has been really interesting. I'm looking. I agree. Conference realignment has certainly been It's funny how it's fallen into the background considering how much of it, especially with that July, that late June, early July surprise of USC and UCLA heading over there. Of course, UCLA kept the drama going with the UC system wanting to pretend like they were going to keep them. I was of full belief that if the UC Regents had ever said, no, we're not going to let UCLA go, they were still going to go and just have a lawsuit in the process. But instead, they're paying, I mean, calimony to, the Berkeley campus for their for their departure. But anyway, so hey, Dave, you've been patient. What's going on? Oh, looks like we okay. Actually, oh, there we go. No, I saw you on mute for a second there. Oh, might be having some problems with the mic monster.
Can you guys hear me now?
Oh, yes, I can.
There we go.
That was very odd. I don't know what happened. That was odd, but I'll take it. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? There was a big national championship over the weekend, the Celebration Bowl. Deion's last game, lost to North Carolina Central. Congrats to them, my rival school. So now things are happening in the transfer portal. Jackson State lost a lot of players. Prior to the game, A&T's head coach Sam Washington, A&T parted ways. So right now A&T's looking for a new head coach, which was kind of shocking for a lot of the fan base there. So now and they spotted Sam Washington at the Celebration Bowl. So I wanted to get you guys' thoughts on like potential head coaching options for A&T. Where does Jackson State go from here with regards to what's going on in the portal? They've already lost over 35 players to the portal. How will that affect them from an APR standpoint? Because I think that's going to be a big concern as well. Just wanted to kind of throw a bunch of random things in the air.
Yeah. So obviously, well, first of all, the Celebration Bowl got a lot better than I expected. I think we were all waiting to see, can the SWAC actually defeat the MEAC? Obviously they didn't, but it was a lot better than, last year. And certainly that drop, my goodness, that drop in overtime by the tight end, that just absolutely, that's one that he's never going to live down. I wonder if he's in the portal. Maybe not.
No, he shouldn't be in the portal, man. That things happen, but in my eyes,
Yeah.
man, it shouldn't have came down to that anyway. Like Central made a lot of mistakes at the beginning of the game because they had numerous opportunities to take that game out of it, and I felt like they could. And I felt like going into the game, if Central starts fast and get Jackson out of it, they would have tapped out anyway. Because a lot of those players were kind of like, our coach is leaving anyway. A lot of them were heading to the portal, type of thing. So it was just more of a I'm here type of thing. So I want to try to
Dave, actually, Dave, one thing I wanted to ask you though, because I mean, we've had this conversation before. I'm surprised, or I don't know, Willie Simmons is still at Florida A&M. I thought he might be someone who was going to get poached. I mean, when you brought him up, I think you were the first caller to ever bring up the fact, will someone go ahead and grab him? But in a way, it's great for Florida A&M because he's been such a talent there that he stayed put so far.
Yeah, and you know what? And the thing is, I know the South Florida folks was rooting for it. A lot of them were rooting for it. But at the same time, and now even with the whole abrupt parting ways of Sam Washington at North Carolina A&T, there's some folks are asking about Willie Simmons and whether or not he's willing to come. And I'm like, he loves FAMU. He loves Tallahassee. It's going to take a lot to pull him. Like, he's got to be in, like, the perfect situation. And because
good.
He's from there, his family's from there. He was supposed to play there, and it didn't happen because around that same time, FAMU was trying to go FBS, and they couldn't. And he was going to transfer, and that couldn't happen at that point because we have to sit a year.
Oh yeah, I remember that ill-fated attempt to move up, but yeah. Now I gotta admit, I haven't paid as close attention to who might go to North Carolina A&T because they've been obviously they're a strong program because they're in the Colonial next season. If I'm correct, is that their first? Or
Yeah.
am I mixing that up?
Nope.
Yeah, so that's
Nope. They joined the Colonial this year in every sport but football. Next season they'll be in Colonial for football.
yeah, that's what I was trying to
There's
remember. I knew
rumblings that they're
football
gonna
was next year.
there's rumblings that they're gonna change the name of the conference. So we'll see how that goes.
Excellent. So gosh, I'm not sure who. I mean, they certainly can win. I mean, we all know the whole story there and how they were dominating the Celebration Bowl, and sometimes I think to a little bit of disappointment, they kind of wanted to also see how they'd stack up in the FCS playoff. But certainly, it's been a little bit softer for them since they left the MEAC, and I'd be curious to see who they'd pull. I mean, what names have you been hearing?
Oh, I've heard they I've heard some names, but there's nothing solid, right? The defensive coordinator for William and Mary. There were some talks of maybe they try to get. Uh, there's an assistant in North Carolina State that they were thinking about trying to get. There's some names that's been coming out, but there's nothing like they've been hush hush. And because nowadays there's no beat writers anymore in Greensboro, like they used to have somebody on the beat, and that was like their gig was to follow the college schools, the college sports in the city. And the News and Record there don't have the local paper there doesn't have that anymore. So you kind of so the advantage goes to the colleges in the area because now they can keep hush hush.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to get like legitimate data out of them to figure out what's going on. But the parting ways of the coach kind of happened pretty suddenly. So we're hoping that those guys and gals got a plan in their offices, and then we'll go from
Well,
there and see what happens next.
the good news, I think, for fans at North Carolina A&T is they're in a strong conference. They're going to get attention, so that's going to make the job at least attractive to the right kind of coach. It's not like they've won before, they can win again. They're going to be in the Colonial Athletics, so they're going to get attention. They're going to be stacking up against some tough teams, which will give them again. That's what you want if you're trying to get your name out there. So hopefully they can find someone there. But going back to Jackson State. I know it's TC Taylor is the person they put up. That's a tough situation to be in. I think whoever followed Dion was going to be in that kind of situation. I admit 35 players entering the portal. Obviously, that doesn't mean they've left, but how many can he claw back? It's going to be the question. And they're going to lose some. That's for sure. There's some people that are just going to go.
Like so far, like I mean, I've been trying to pay attention. Like I can't keep track of how many players they've lost so far, but like when you got long snappers doing the Instagram post saying that they're going ahead into the portal, it's getting rough. When you get to the point of the long snapper doing Instagram posts, that's when the streets are rough, right?
Yeah.
Like so like, and I've been trying to pay attention to what's going on with A&T because Putin, our running back, when he hit the portal, that's when things started getting flaky for me. I was like, oh, Tootin's hitting the portal. And then a few hours after Tootin hit the portal, then that was when the Sam Washington announcement happened. And we just lost the recruit to FAMU too because of it as well, because they haven't really like told everybody what's going on. So we'll see what happens with that situation. But as for Jackson State, they're gonna be fine. I'm more concerned about the APR side of the fence for them. Because, when you have so many of those transfers, their APR is going to get impacted unless there's a bunch of grad transfers, right? So that's the concern for them. Like even with A&T, a lot of the kids that have transferred so far, about half of them graduated. So it's like, all right, it's not going to impact the APR that much. Like Newton leaving is going to probably impact it a bit, but so far we've lost, I think right now the number's at 7 players, which isn't that bad. Still not good, but it's not that bad. It's more bad about the players that we've lost because they're really good players. Because our best 2 linebackers hit the portal, our best 2 running backs hit the portal. So it's about some of the players that we're losing.
Just kind of one thing I want to know your thoughts on, because losing Dion, it seemed like eventually he would leave. I think a lot of people wondering, will this season, will be next season. He certainly had a very successful life, so isn't in a real pinch that he needs to necessarily leave unless it seems like an intriguing job to him. Clearly, Colorado was it. Although, again, my favorite part of that whole hiring process was the AD at Colorado. Somebody asked him, like, "Oh, how have you guys budgeted this?" It's like, well, we haven't yet, but we Which I love. That is the most blatantly open statement I've ever heard. Like, yeah, we haven't quite figured out how we're going to pay for him and his staff, but we'll figure it out. Once he gets here, maybe he was hoping he'd loosen some pockets among the alumni. But just the impact he's had to HBCU football, I wasn't. I mean, I was a little skeptical at first, only because I'm like, well, how good can he actually coach? And then certainly this season he shut me up, and I think quite a few people, because you don't go that far. I mean, okay, yeah, the Celebration Bowl is a loss, but in overtime, and again, it was a better game than last year's. So I hope we see that continue, at least the interest that he built in a lot of these programs, because those who know that HBCU football always, is the top of FCS attendance. I mean, not just, you know, season-wide attendance among teams, but also individual game attendance. I mean, you just can't beat the attendance figures you see at games, like the Bayou Classic, like the Celebration Bowl, like so many of those major games that take place around the country. So I'm just glad he brought some national attention to it, so it isn't kind of this thing where some fans, especially outside of that community, know about, but not really that many. And I hope we continue to see that strength, that attention that I think to some extent benefited a lot of programs up and down, FBS, FCS, and pardon me, FCS D2, as well as the programs that were in the traditional HBCU conferences and outside of it, because we've seen that growth, we've seen that spread across, more than where it was before, and it's just been such a phenomenon to see, and I hope it continues, because it's wonderful to see, and it's wonderful to have that, and we'll see how it continues. It's a big question. I don't know. What do you think, Dave?
So for me, when the announcement came that Dion was going to go to Jackson State, in my heart of hearts, I was hoping he was going to stick around for a longer period of time, because I've always felt like to do the impact of sustainment that what he was trying to do, for what he said he wanted to do, it was going to take longer than like the 2 to 3 year period that I anticipated that he was going to stay. Right. So, you know, it would have been great, but we know that college coaches don't really do that anymore. But at HBCUs, that tends to be a thing. Like when you have a successful coach, they tend to stay for a much longer period of time, right? Like like a Nick Saban who's been at Alabama forever. But that type of run doesn't happen as often in the FBS realm. But in HBCUs, if you got a winning program, that tends to be a thing. That still happens if you have a winning program. So, but when you talk about the impact that he did for HBCUs, he did get more eyeballs on on it. I think Jackson State benefited from it big time from the standpoint of exposure, situational awareness of some of the challenges that Jackson State and other HBCUs had. Some of the things that he was trying to push to the public to let folks be aware. But like you said earlier, man, like when it came to attendance, uh, the SWAC and the MEAC was always the lead dogs when it came to attendance. They always was near the top, and even some of the HBCUs that are not in the SWAC and the MEAC was near the top. North Carolina A&T is always near the top. Tennessee State is always near the top when it came to attendance in the FCS. So when you take all those things into account, it was great from that standpoint. Like the Celebration Bowl has been playing on ABC since the beginning. Bayou Classic, it was great to see that get back on NBC, which was long overdue. It should have never left NBC, but let's hope it stays on NBC, right? So I think like these are great things to see. Um, for Jackson State as a whole, I don't think they're gonna go 12-0. Nobody ever doubted that Dion couldn't coach. Um, but it's gonna be interesting to see how he does in Colorado.
Wait a minute.
Um,
I doubted if Dion could coach. I'll be the first one to admit it.
huh?
I seriously doubted Dion's skills when he came up to Jackson State. I still
Um,
doubt him now, even though he went 12-0. So forgive me for being the skeptic out of the crew here.
nah, nah, I thought he could coach. Like I thought he could coach, but it's just a matter of getting your guys too. So, but it's going to be interesting to see how he does in Colorado, man. Because I
That's
mean,
that's when it gets there. Now he could get the people. He could sit there and flash a smile and get a talent level at the swag that some coaches couldn't match there. So I saw that. That's where I was like, okay, he got his people. Okay, let it work. Let it die. He gets to Colorado. I want to see if he gets his people and still be able to compete against conference because he could still get his people and still be outclassed.
oh yeah, coach is going to matter a little bit more in Colorado. It's going to matter
Mm-hmm.
more, and he's going to be in
Right.
a. He's going to. I mean, he like I think once it's going to get interesting once USC and UCLA heads out of the conference and how that framework's going to look after that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So it'll be
yeah.
interesting. It'll be interesting to see then. But I will say, as a Carolina Panthers fan, I am rooting for him to beat the brakes off Nebraska um, at the beginning of the season.
Oh
I would like
wow.
Oh,
him to beat the
Oh wow.
brakes, the certifiable brakes out of Matt Rule in Nebraska, like certifiable brakes, certifiable
oh my
brakes.
goodness. Well, they're already rivals to begin with. People forget, like, Nebraska's famous for being super nice fans. If you go there, they'll always applaud the opposing team. They're always into that. But there's one team they truly have they have a long, respectful rivalry with Oklahoma and all of that. But man, the vitriol between Colorado and Nebraska fans, this is just going to get magnified, no doubt, especially yeah, when they play each other, yeah, that's gonna be that's gonna be something else. I'll tell you.
I'm looking for. I'm looking for. Like that's must see TV for me because I need Colorado to beat the brakes out of them, man. I really do.
Uh, oh,
That
I
has
love
to
it.
happen. That has to happen.
Well,
No,
it's gonna be a
it
fun
has to
game to
happen.
watch. Yeah, for sure. Hey, JD, what do you think about that particular matchup? Oh, did we? Hey, by the way, I just want to welcome any of you out there who'd like to join us. Just hit request. We love hearing from you. We love talking about all levels of college football.
Like
Oh, hey,
I
JD's got
want
a
to say
mic
one thing.
monster. Yeah.
I don't know if Dr. Gaville wants to hop up here. Dr. Kiana Gaville wants to hop up here, but he's like um the HBCU king when it comes to this type of thing, man. He's been doing it
Oh,
for way longer than me. So I don't know if he wants to come up here, but shout out to him. He's
well,
like
I'll
a
send him
professor
an
when it comes
invite to
to it.
speak. If he wants to come up, he can. He's always welcome. We love hearing from anybody who wants to talk. It's something we enjoy and hearing different voices and all sorts of thoughts. Oh, and it looks like, by the way, as I'm talking, Toledo pulled it off. There was that game got the Boca Raton Bowl was kind of going on in the background, and Liberty got within 2 points, went for two, failed, and Toledo has defeated Liberty to go, there was 21-19. Toledo's going to go 8-5. Liberty's going to fall to 8-4. Actually, 8-5. Pardon me. Toledo should be 9 and I'm sorry. Anyways, that's fourth loss in a row for Liberty. Of course, this time I don't think Hugh Freeze was their coach. So just giving that one a quick update on there. I know JD's run into a slight problem. I watched the system kick him off. We let him back on. That's something that
It
we've
sounds
dealt.
like me. That's
Oh
probably
yeah,
what
no,
happened
no.
to me
Oh,
when you
Dave,
told.
when you said that, I was laughing because it's like Twitter Spaces. We've run into every problem, and I'm not even talking like in the last few months. I mean, since we started these, there's always some kind of like weird surprise. But looks like Mr. Cavill, you've been able to make it up here. We'd love to hear from you, or Doctor, pardon me, Doctor Cavill,
Yeah, it's Dr. Cavill, Kenyatta
Cavill.
Cavill. Oh,
Sorry.
it's fine. It happens. Actually, it's one half of the family. It says Cavill and Cavill, so long-standing
Oh
joke.
yeah, my name's Bob Akhyeri. I hear you. Let me tell you, I I actually die a little inside when I mispronounce somebody's name because that's mine's been mispronounced so many times in my lifetime.
Yeah,
So, but anyways, welcome
no
up.
problem at all. Thanks for the welcome. Just wanted to say thanks for the invite, and glad that a little bit of HBCU sports talk was going on. Always happy to hear and share some love with those that have some interest in HBCU football. I think we had a tremendous season, obviously showcased by the Celebration Bowl with a game that is part of the ages. And congratulations goes out to North Carolina Central. The Eagles there for getting it done in that overtime game, but kudos for the talent and skill that was played in that game. One of the things that fascinated me about that game was how much you saw the young talent actually making plays throughout the game, freshmen and sophomore talent, even some juniors that you don't traditionally see um, at many times in college football. Obviously, usually it's the upperclassmen, particularly as of late when you have a lot of folks that are able to come back with COVID years, and so you have 6, 7 year type players, graduate student transfers, and in some cases even 8 year players that we've seen over the last couple of years because of that COVID and redshirt year. But to see that young talent making plays, I think was one of the things that stood out to me among several things in that matchup, particularly this year.
What are your thoughts? I mean, we've talked about it a bit, and it's something that I know Dave gave his thoughts on, as well as and I apologize, I don't know your name. I just was going by your username, the civilized choice. But what are your thoughts on the effect that Deion Sanders has had across the HBCU, football spectrum?
One of the things I came and provided an example on that I asked people to consider is you've seen folks remodel these cars, antique type of cars, and yes, you if they're done properly, you'll look on the outside and be like, oh, that's really nice. What I think Dion was able to do is open the hood of this car. And a lot of people that just may have looked at the outside and thought it was kind of nice, after they took a glance because he opened up the hood and people saw the engine and understood that people had remade the car, if you would. And then they got a chance all of a sudden to look in the engine and say, oh, this is really nice. This is really clean. And so a lot of those things that already existed, but essentially what I think Dion did was open up the hood so folks could really look at the engine and realize that, oh, this is nice. There's some significance about that. And I think once it's been exposed, once the hood is up, I don't think that is something that's easy for folks just to shut it down. So I think people will continue to review, continue to look, and the access will be there. And the second part is the financial support, particularly with the new secondary television contract, is going to allow more money to be put in to the SWAC, particularly, and MEAC is coming up on a deal as well, which I believe will help with the continued growth of the league.
And that's important. I mean, the MEAC particularly, I was a little concerned with the overall stability because obviously they lost a few teams, both those that went into non-HBCU conferences, but of course they lost some to the SWAC as well. So I think this is going to be. I mean, I always wondered. I mean, it's one of those things where I think academics will be able to write about it, frankly, or those who study the game quite in detail, just to see how much of an impact it's going to be in the long run as we see as years pass, and to see how it goes. I mean, to echo what was being mentioned earlier, I'm really interested to see how Dion does with Colorado because that's a tough job. I was surprised he took that one because that seems like a tough job for just about anybody.
You gotta remember, sir. You can only take what's being offered to you.
That's
It
true.
doesn't seem like he was getting that many offers.
Yeah, and I wondered if time would help heal that, or if people were still thinking of primetime academy. JD, by the way, is your mic fixed? I mean,
I
know.
think it is. I think it is.
Oh, good. There
Okay,
you are.
there we
All
go.
right. Yeah,
There we
no. I
go.
just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, no. I mean, I was just going to be in full agreement of you take the opportunities that are given to you. And I think one of the big things for Dion when he was leaving Jackson State was that was the very clear message that he gave to his players of, he brought game day to Jackson, Mississippi. He brought such an elevated amount of attention to Jackson State and really got to show off so much talent at a school like that. And especially when you had a Celebration Bowl that had breakout performances from guys like Kevin Coleman Jr. I mean, that 85-yard catch and run that he had in that game was just phenomenal. But then when you look at what he did, I love that analogy of opening up the hood and kind of getting to see what the engine is inside. I mean, HBCU football has always had an incredible amount of history, an incredible amount of well-played football, but this really got it the attention that it needed in 2022. And I think a lot more people are excited now to know what else is offered at this level of football and the kind of celebration that you get to have at that level of football. There are so many young, strong talents at HBCU schools, and I'm very excited to see what they're continuing to do in the future. And even with Deion Sanders taking this Colorado job, it has left such an impact for not just Jackson State, but for your North Carolina Centrals, for your Gramblings, for all these other programs that are within those very specific and very special realms of football. I've absolutely loved seeing that grow and elevate, and I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with all these coaches who are going to continue that legacy and continue that excellence to make sure that there's a continued interest in that sport.
Can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
Yes, please.
Seems like I'm the only D2 NAIA guy around here. So I'll speak up for Benedict College, Coach Berry, the SIC champs, undefeated, number 1 seed in the South region. So great jobs to them as well. Virginia Union knocking off the defending national champions, Valdosta State, early in the year. Getting in on earned credit, too. I want to commend the CIAA for competing this year and actually getting teams in by merit instead of, hey, they just there. So just wanted to highlight that before I let everything go. And, of course, y'all have a wonderful night.
Yeah, you too. And, we've had Chris Ferguson on. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a great writer on D2 football, especially on CIAA and the SEAC. And we had him on, a couple months ago. So we talked a bit about it. And, yeah, I absolutely agree. Virginia Union, I was blown away by that, the way they kind of launched into this season. And as you mentioned, beat up Valdosta State and did so well. And, yeah, Benedict
that
made
running
it
back
far.
they got, man. Jada Byers is special, man.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, he was,
he's special, man. Unbelievable. And I'm from Columbia, South Carolina, so Benedict will always have a special place in my heart. So,
see, Byers reminds me of an old teammate, and you might know him, Dave, former Carolina's Panthers running back Fred Lane.
Yes, sir.
He reminded me of him when I saw like bits and pieces of his highlights, because it was just a burst in his runs where you could see him separate from, the best kids on the other team. It was like, yeah, there's something special about him. So I'm actually looking forward to him getting to the NFL, because I'm like, okay, if he's doing that there, he got the flash there. Somehow, some way, he got the flash.
He also reminds me of another Aggie. He reminds me of an Aggie too, Tariq Cohen. The kid's good, man.
Yeah, the kid's good.
Well, we're slowly starting to get to our normal wrap-up time. I just wanted to offer up an opportunity if any of our guests who are up here right now want to give us some final thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. JD, you're included on this. But Dave, I saw you on mute.
His mic doesn't work anymore.
Oh yeah. He's been that darn mic monster, man. Oh, there you are, JD.
We out here.
Nah, this was fun. I'm glad I was able to hop in, man, because it was a good weekend for HBCU football. The weekend's over. The HBCU football season is over. I just wanted to bring up the Celebration Bowl because, it's pretty much the ultimate. It's pretty much the HBCU mecca in college, in HBCU sports now. I didn't get to go this year. I got to make sure I make a trip. I joke about it because, A&T can't play in it anymore, so we dub it the Aggie Invitational because we won 4. But I know there was a lot of Aggies there. I got phone calls about it. So I'm going to try to make a conscious effort to get down there next year to Atlanta that weekend.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's one of those games I've got circled that I want to eventually go to. That and the Bahamas Bowl.
Yes.
I do. As long as they're not on the same day.
I do want to throw one thing out there that I did also love from the Celebration Bowl. We haven't had a chance to talk about it. When you get your wins, post your wins and talk that talk. I loved Trey Oliver's post-game press conference when he straight up was saying, did Colorado get the right guy? If you need to talk, I'll get you the number for my agent. Absolutely love that.
My man said I could have done it for half the price. God, when he said that. He said, "How could I?" So if the ink ain't dry yet, oh, I was done. I was done. And I'm I'm congratulating Central. They're our rival school. I'm happy for them, but I gotta quit giving them too much of this happiness because I got to get back to my regularly scheduled program very, very soon. Because this has been a tough week for Aggies right now. We lost a coach. Central won the Celebration Bowl. It's been a very rough week. So I'm happy for him because I'm still about the MEAC winning this thing, but this has been tough. Between that, SC State winning it last year, tough, very tough. But I digress. But nah, Trey can talk it, man. Trey was an assistant for us at A&T when we won the first one, so I'm happy for him and the rest of that coaching staff and the team
Absolutely.
because Richards is the real deal. He's probably going to be in the league too. Davis Richard, he's going to probably be in the league, I think.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dave. Doctor, do you have any final thoughts?
No, Dave has me cracking up just with his comments. But yeah, if you know anything about Trey Oliver, he's cut his teeth throughout the sweat as well as the MEAC, obviously, getting it done. Previously, being a defensive coordinator at Southern and Grambling. So a lot of folks had a great deal of respect for what he brought to the table. And I think a lot of folks quietly that were involved with HBCU sports understood that this would be a very classic matchup. And so I'm just glad to continue to look at football. I've been at the Celebration Bowl every year since it started. Don't plan to miss it. It's become the mecca for HBCU sports fans because not only do you get the uniqueness of both teams coming very deep, you have a lot of HBCU fans that just like the culture and understand what this opportunity means to HBCU sports. So whether it's at the Division II level, um, with CIAA and SIEC fans that was referenced earlier, or MEAC and SWAC fans, or even some of the fans that are no longer associated with HBCU conference, if you would, from Tennessee State, North Carolina A&T, Hampton fans. You've seen them all out there just mixing and mingling. So it's a great event. So folks want to see a different cultural perspective of what that looks like in football, from the bands, good football being played, and just a social gathering of folks really reveling in the history. It's a great place to be. I got a chance. You talked about Bahama Bowl. I do want to get to that, but they had a classic called the HBCUX Classic. Seems like about 10 years now ago, with Central State playing Texas Southern. I got to go to that game that was held in Bahamas. So I agree with you. Any reason to get to the Bahamas is perfect. And then you throw in some football with it, it doesn't get much better than that. So, yeah, if we can find a way that those games don't coexist on the same weekend, I might meet you down there in the Bahamas for that game as well.
I'd love to. That would be great. We all hang out. And I love every time I hear a report about what it's like at that game. It's like, yeah, just show up, show anything that looks vaguely like a ticket, bring beer. They don't care. They'll just let you in. It's a different mindset. It's
Exactly.
an
Yep.
awesome mindset.
And bring drums and join them with the Junkanoo. You really have a good time.
Well, I think we're starting to wrap up. I've heard, whoa, is that true? Sorry, I just had a headline show up on my screen. Did JT Daniels decide to do Rice? Is that what I'm reading? Oh my gosh. JT Daniels to Rice. Wow, that is. Yeah, Pete Thamel. Yeah, I see that right now. He's reporting that. So JT Daniels, the quarterback who's been everywhere, who started at USC. I can't remember if he's the guy who actually has a USC tattoo. Was at Georgia last season and backing up a national championship team. Went to West Virginia this season and is now going to be playing at Rice. So that's the big news story that popped up just on our feed right now. So that'll be something kind of interesting to report right now. And one last thing, the civilized choice. Did you want to also have just a final statement? I just saw you unmuted.
Well, they've said their little Celebration Bowl perspective. Mine is, this is my second year going, and both years it was kind of like a diagnostic game for me because I have a couple of coaching friends that you normally attend with, and we just watch, the best teams in HBCU go at it. So For us, it's more of a, football day, celebrate the best, things that we aspired to when we were playing, seeing the new kids out there carrying on our traditions, coming out the tunnel, seeing the bros, seeing the alpha, everybody being out. It's like Doc said, it's just like a HBCU Mecca game. I saw a couple of old classmates there. I got a chance to catch up with them, and it's kind of like a reunion, and you get to talk a lot of stuff. So hey, but thank you for having me on, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself tonight. Thank you again.
I'm so glad to hear that. And thanks to all three of you guys up here. Thanks to everyone who joined us earlier. We learned a lot. We talked a lot about HBCU football, right now about JT Daniels heading to Rice. And obviously we got to talk about how that Boca Raton Bowl got close. We've got a lot of bowls coming up soon. I mean, we talked about the celebration and the other bowls so far, but tomorrow night, New Orleans Bowl, it's always a good one. They got Western Kentucky against South Alabama, who they got the least amount of attention, I think, for a 10-win team. And I think those fans of the Jags are really thrilled because Kane Womack I'm surprised he did not get poached this season. And if he comes even close to the level he did, and especially, I mean, he has a chance to go 11-2 this season. I think he's going to be one of those big names we see getting poached in the next coaching cycle. But anyways, I know JD had a bounce, but my name's Bob Ekayeri. I was joined by my regular co-host, JD Moore. We love to do these on Tuesday nights. We always do these. Love to hear from you. I just want to say how much we enjoy hearing from you, and we hope you're all having good holidays and you get a break to relax and take a rest at some point or another, or you're stuck with your kids at home now more than ever, which some of us are right now. Anyway, I hope all of you are great. Thanks for joining us. Now I'm going to hang up and listen.